Hi everyone, thank you for joining the session from Arctic Shores, where we're going to be talking about diversity and inclusion and the efforts and the processes that we've put in place to help you combat D&I in your recruitment and your use of psychometrics. Quick introductions from Lara and I. My name's Al Frater. I'm the UK General Manager for Arctic Shores and I'm a business psychologist. And I look after the commercial and client relationships in the UK and the Republic of Ireland, and I've been with the firm for about 3 years. Lara?
Hi, I'm Lara Montefiori. I'm Chief Scientific Officer at Arctic Shores. I joined Arctic Shores on day one. I've done the research. I carried out the research in academia that then set the scene for the scientific foundation of the assessment. I lead the science team, and we have a group of occupational psychologists, neuroscientists, and data scientists, and we're responsible for developing and validating our product.
Brilliant, thank you, Lara. So I'm just going to set the scene for this 15-minute talk or so. Arctic Shores was created 6 years ago to really help level the playing field for assessment. We know that some traditional measures of assessment have a whole host of biases and challenges and levels of unfairness in them. And our founding team wanted to do something about that, but utilizing technology and doing something a little bit different to help you as the recruiter, or even if you're using this in a development context, as lots of our clients are now doing as well, to assess candidates in a fair way that gives them the best opportunity to progress through the process and get their dream job or dream role, and it helps you as a talent acquisition community to assess candidates on a fair basis, but to also look at the key behaviors that you know they're going to need to demonstrate in the role that will be linked to success. But we know this is incredibly important. You know, you've probably read all the stats that, you know, diverse teams, whether it's gender, ethnicity, social mobility, that, you know, you see improvements in brand recognition, in employee satisfaction, on bottom line results. More companies are more profitable if they have a diverse workforce. And we've got a white paper that we'll link to at the end of this webinar, where you can read some of the stats if you're not aware of those, to bring it to life a little bit. So it's clearly a really important thing. I'll be back in a second to talk about some practical tips, but over to Lara to talk you through some of the things we've done with the platform.
So thank you all. So diversity and inclusion was one of the leading forces of us starting Arctic Shores and rethinking about the assessment, the way we thought about it. And one of the questions that I wanted to answer in my research prior to Arctic Shores was, how can we make an assessment that is so stable and unsusceptible to bias that cannot be faked? So how can we make an assessment that can really go into the individual and understand the individual and describe it? So that's why we decided to embed neuroscientific evidence into the assessment, so that we have a really good understanding of who the individual really is, without caring about who they are in terms of what group they belong to. And this is great, because if you think about the recent happenings around the world about discrimination of specific social groups, what if every single social group had equal opportunity to shine and to be represented in all the different kinds of occupations that are available to the majority? That bias will decrease, because when we think about bias has a really, really bad PR, which it should have, but is a very natural thing to happen. As human, we have limited cognitive resources. So we need to use rule and preconception to understand every single scenario that we encounter without having to assess all the detail of that scenario. So what we attach, all the factors that we attach to a certain demographic will have to change, and we can make that change by expanding opportunities to all the demographics that are in your applicant pool, rather than a specific slice of the demographic that resemble the person, the people interviewing the workforce.
Lara, can you explain for viewers of the webinar who might not be fully familiar with Arctic Shores and all of our products, how they can utilize the assessment and the data that comes off the back of it to help reduce bias and improve their D&I metrics?
Yeah, certainly. So first of all, I think people have to be comfortable around the notion that they have bias and really make peace with not being perfect. And second, they should really reach out to companies like Arctic Shores, able to generate objective data to illustrate the psychological profiles of the applicants. Um, sometimes there's the traditional unconscious bias whereby an interviewer meets a person who reminds them of themselves, and they feel like this person is right for the job, this person is going to succeed in the same way I have succeeded. But this is exactly how we have some demographic underrepresented in the right levels in the organization. That will decrease that unconscious bias, that will make diversity the rule rather than the exception. So in a way, you can say that we are helping people becoming data-driven, transitioning to that data-driven decision-making models to select their workforce. And this is one of the most important things that we do.
The first iteration of the assessment that we published was a very game-like format, and you mentioned the word game a second ago. But I think viewers of this webinar will now see that if they look at our website, and I encourage you to go and do that, you will see that the assessments have changed, and they're less kind of game-like now. And they still use game technology, and we're very proud of that. But they're much more sort of akin to those neuroscience experiments. So can you talk us through that sort of evolution?
Yeah, so absolutely. So the neuroscience has always been there. Absolutely, that was the basis, and that's where I knew that we could leverage a really highly scientific and highly regulated discipline into something that could give us insights on the individual. The reason why we moved from the word game and all the semantics attached to game is that the term doesn't really reflect how scientifically saturated our assessment is. And I've been asked so many times, does your assessment, does the game-based assessment discriminate against non-gamer? What about old people who haven't been brought up digitally like millennials? And the answer is no, absolutely not. I carried out a lot of research in academia and outside academia to really understand, is there any difference between gamers or different kind of gamers? There's no difference. The assessment doesn't discriminate against older people, and fun enough, the older the candidate, the better the perception of the assessment is. So absolutely no discrimination there. It's just that we wanted to move into something that's in a term and also a semantic attached to it that really reflected what we're measuring. We're measuring people's behavior. We're measuring how people react to different things, how people make decision, and what they use to inform decision. And because we believe that behavior that is expressed in a controlled environment is the best predictor of the behavior that then will be expressed in the workplace.
What I'd add to that is that one of the key benefits is around the removal of self-report. So, you know, as Lara's alluded to, and the way we get candidates to interact with these assessments in the engaging format that we present it in, is that we just remove all of that self-report. We don't ask anyone to tell us about themselves, where you add in another layer of complexity and cognition and bias potential at that point. We just simply watch what candidates do. And so I've done a couple of talks for the recruitment events company on that subject. So check out their YouTube channel. You'll probably find me talking about it. But one thing that we are asked about, Lara, and it'd be interesting to get your thoughts about, is neurodiversity in particular. Can you sort of share some thoughts around how assessment can cope with neurodiverse candidates, of which around about 20% of the population has some level of neurodiversity that can be recorded?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I want to link back to what you were saying about the self-reported measure as well, and having a little bit of a comparison with that, because there are some issues with the self-reported measures that you mentioned already, but one of the issues also that it doesn't really capture any differences in scores between neurotypical and neurodiverse individuals, simply because they don't have enough data. And what happens in that case is that there's a blanket reasonable adjustment of an X amount of percentage of more time given to the individual, which has been demonstrated not to be necessarily very useful, and definitely doesn't cater for all the different nuances of neurodiversity.
Yeah.
We are in a completely different position, because having all this data generated by neuropsychological and neuroscientific tasks, we can really see emerging patterns that differentiates neurotypical and neurodiverse people, and out of the neurodiverse group, we see different emerging patterns depending of the specificity of the neurodiversity that we're observing, and we are able to manipulate the method of our scorings to level that up, to balance the scores that will be generated in the end products between people on the whole representation of the spectrum for neurotypical to neurodiverse. Some adjustments that we apply to the scores are very simple. Some are very complex and really do take into consideration all the nuances. If you think about conditions like ADHD, it's not just one element that is different in the way in which people reason and perceive the world. There's so many different and beautiful things, and some of which are really positive if you think about the enhanced creativity and the different ways in which people approach certain things. But we want to make sure that those differences don't generate a disadvantage for those groups. So we run a lot of studies and research to make sure that we, first of all, pinpoint all the differences, and second, we adjust so to eliminate any possible disadvantage.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm conscious of time, and so I'm going to start wrapping up. But I think that's a really great segue into the benefits of why this really should be taken seriously at all times, not just when thinks an event happens to trigger this. Lara's alluded to creativity and kind of innovation there, that might be something that you can really turbocharge by looking at certain populations, or in making sure that those populations are in the workforce. And things like profitability that I mentioned at the start absolutely can be increased by making sure you have a diverse team at all levels in the organization, but certainly in the higher echelons of the organization. It's something we absolutely need to strive for. I think that the key thing here, and Lara alluded to it, is mitigating that bias and putting procedures in place to make sure that can happen. And one of those solutions would be to use a technology like the Arctic Shores platform, but there are other technologies out there too. But you can't do any of that until you have that sort of transparency to admit that there's a problem. And we know that a lot of you are, and hopefully that's why you're watching this webinar today. But I think we really need to push as an industry for more transparency. So let's have transparency on things like gender pay and ethnicity levels. And I know more and more companies are now starting to do that. But we need to get board level focus on this. And if we have board level focus on this, then we will start to be able to accurately say, well, this is the state of play. Now, we're not expecting people to be perfect. I don't think any one group would expect perfection straight away. But what we know is that there's a lot of imperfection and not much action in terms of how we can go from that state to positive, action to really start reversing those trends. So my call to you all would be, let's have that transparency. Let's be honest with ourselves about where we are. Let's look at processes and call them out when they aren't right. Let's look at other solutions. What HR tech is out there? I'm sure there's lots of demos as part of the tag event that you can go and see that will help you with those. And then let's look to educate the organizations that we work in and start recognizing that there is a challenge and we need to do something about that, and having empathy for that challenge, right? We need to make sure that we are sympathetic to the challenges of those underrepresented groups of society, and we need to make sure that the process we have doesn't compound other challenges that might be affecting those pockets of the community. So I hope this was useful. If you want to find out more about Arctic Shores, you can contact us. Our contact details will be at the end of this. And I think that's all from us. So thank you, Lara, for joining me. And if you have any questions, then do reach out to us. And thanks for your time.